All right. Hey, Algebra 1. I hope you guys are doing well. Let's jump into Section 7. All right. Chapter 2, Section 7. We're talking square roots and comparing numbers. So let's just go ahead and write. Everybody is on page 95. All right. So textbooks always need to be open, compos with you, or a page of notes getting ready to take all of this important information down. All right. Let's jump into it. So we are talking about square roots. So we are going to be doing a lot of information here about square roots that are perfect roots or square roots that maybe are not perfect roots. Okay, so some quick definitions. The symbol, in other words, that square root symbol, that's called the radical. All right, so a lot of times you will just hear me say like radical 25. So in other words, that means take the square root of 25. Okay. And then what is that number called that is underneath the radical? All right, that's the radicand. The radicand. All right, so that right there is kind of the basic definitions, just in case you see that written in the textbook, on a test, or hear me say it, now you know. Okay, now the next thing we want to jump into is you can't, that is cannot, take the square root of a negative number. But you can have a negative sign that's on the outside of that radical, therefore making that final answer a negative. So there's some examples that I wanted to write up there. So let's start with the simple square root 25 is 5. That's great. But what if I said the square root of negative 25? Well, that's undefined. You can't do it. Okay? But what if you put that negative sign out of the radical, in front of the radical, so that underneath the radical is just a regular 25. Well, then the square root of 25 is 5, but that negative sign that's on the outside would then come into play, creating a final answer that is negative 5. Okay, because that sign comes in right at the end there. All right, now you may see this symbol that is a plus sign with a negative sign or a minus sign directly underneath it. That means plus or minus. And if you see that symbol right in front of the radical, then you need to use that symbol in your answer. Okay, so don't forget that on tests, because that is important and students forget every single year. So if you see the symbol plus, minus, then the radical sign, in your answer, you need to have that plus minus in front of your answer. So that meant if they said plus or minus the square root of 100, your answer would be plus or minus 10. Okay. Now, just in case any of us forgot, and I'm sure you love hearing this, no calculators. All right, you need to do all of these problems from your head, that piece of paper. All right, no calculators. Now, you may hear me say the phrase, is it a perfect root or does it have a perfect square root? Perfect roots will have perfect answers. In other words, there's no decimal. So like the number 4 is a perfect root because the square root of 4 is 2. The number 25 is a perfect because the square root of 25 is 5. The square root of 81 is 9. So 81 has a perfect root. Okay? Now, if a square root does not work out perfectly, that would be like, what if I took the square root of 80? All right, it's close to 81, but not good enough. The square root of 80 does not work out perfectly, so it will create an irrational number. Any square root that does not work out perfectly will create an irrational number. Don't forget that. All right. Just a quick example, square root of 36, it's 6. That works out perfect. So that creates a rational number. But the square root of 37, not perfect, irrational number. All right. Now, I'm telling you guys, I tell my students this every year, and those students that take advantage of this and take the time to do it, it always pays off. All right. I would really, as I said, it would really help, sorry if I read my own words correctly there, to memorize every perfect square from 1 to 20. Okay, so then I wrote out, what do I mean? 1 times 1 is 1, 2 times 2 is 4, 3 times 3 is 9. If you memorize all of those from 1 to 20, or even more than 20, It's going to really, really help you because you will already have memorized or at least written down on your notes everything from 1 to 20, maybe even 1 to 30. And that way, those square roots you will already have access to. Okay? And you don't have to think about it. You don't have to work them out. You don't have to wonder, is this a perfect root or not? Because you've already memorized it. Okay. I said all that teacher stuff right there. Let's jump into some example problems. All right, 49. That is a perfect root. This is some stuff that you should have memorized already. So 49, that's going to create 7. But that negative sign that's out in front will be incorporated into my answer and create a negative 7 for the final answer. Okay, so don't forget that. Now, number 2, you'll notice we have a plus or minus. As I already said in the notes, if I give you a plus or minus, or the book does, then you have to have that plus or minus in your answer. So write that first, get that out of the way. Now 121, this works out perfect. I wanted to pick some problems here that you hopefully already have memorized as far as what is the square root of 121. It works out perfectly. It is 11. If you don't have those memorized, do it. Memorize 1 to 20. It will help you greatly. Or take the time to write it out on a piece of paper. Take the time, you will be fine. All right, let's move into example 3. Pay close attention here because now we jumped up big time. The square root of 676. Odds are you do not know what the answer is to that right off the top of your head. So I'm going to teach you what I was taught and what I used to do when I did not have access to a calculator, and also I did not want to just guess blindly. All right? You can do some educated guessing, but it really can become guessing blindly, and on a test you're just guessing until you hit the magic number. But this method I'm going to teach you gives you a path or a plan of attack to get there. So the first thing you want to do is create what I call the bookends. And those bookends are always in groups of 10 or a base 10. So in other words, the number 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 or 50. Those are groups of 10. So start by creating your bookends. And that's going to be the low number that's smaller than 676, and then the number that's bigger than 676. So let's start with 20, because 20 times 20 is 400. So that's the low end. And then the next one would be 30, because 30 times 30 is 900. All right, so now what we have is we have our bookends. We know that our answer is in between 20 and 30. So every other number, don't worry about. Okay, we also know that our answer isn't 20 and it isn't 30. So now we've already dropped it down to thinking it could be between 21 and 29. Okay, well now ask yourself this question. Is 676, is that closer to 900, or is it closer to 400? All right, and if we did our math on this one, let's see. Okay, it is going to be closer to 900 by a little bit. And let's say now we can cross out everything below the number 25. Let's cut it off right in the middle. Okay, and like I said, we already know it's not 30. So now we're looking at a number between 25 and 29. Okay, now comes the really important part here. Now, how do we figure out? If you just want to start blindly guessing, go for it. But there's one more step that we can get to our answer. Now you focus on the last number and the last number under the radical. Now, what is 5 times 5? That is 25. 5. 5 is not 6, so it's not 25. So now we are looking at a possible 26. Okay, so let's ask ourselves that. What is 6 times 6? And that's going to create 36. Bingo, bingo. The last numbers match up. Therefore, our answer is 26. Okay, now we're going to do one more of those so you can see what I'm talking about. All right, so let's start by creating our bookends here. Okay, now the bookends, we have a brand new number, 1024. Okay, well, let's see. If we took 30, we like 30 because 30 times 30 is 900. That's going to be at the low end. And then the high end has to be 40. By the way, your bookends are always only 10 numbers away from each other. Okay, they're always in that group of 10. And 40 times 40, let's see, that's 1,600. Okay, so clearly we know that we can cut out everything that is above 35. Okay, we also know we can cut out 30 because that makes 900. So now we're looking at 31 to 35. Now you use the last number trick. So 1 times 1 is 1. We know it's not 31. So now we're looking at 32 to 35. And 2 times 2 is 4. And lo and behold, our last number here is 4. And even if you were to double check that, you're going to get the perfect. It is 32. That is your answer there. So I call it the bookend method. I don't know if there's another name for it, but that's kind of the name that I came up with a long time ago. I remember my dad was helping me out, kind of taught me how to do this without calculators. You have to have a plan of attack that gets you to your answer pretty quick once you understand how to use what I call the bookend method. All right, now last two problems. What if they say estimate? So you know that 103 is not a perfect root, okay? But you know that 100 is a perfect root. And you know that the number 100 is very, very close to 103. Now let's not forget, what is an integer? All right, an integer, that's going to be a whole number. And in this case, we're talking about a positive integer. So the estimate, you put those wavy lines because that means that 103 approximately is nearest to the number 10. All right, because 10 times 10 is 100. That's super close to 103. And if we were to drop down and say it's 9, 9 times 9 is 81. That's not as close. Okay, now let's do one more estimate here. 350. All right, so we know that we're going to be giving an approximate. We know that it's an integer, so don't worry about the decimals. Now let's think. If we could use a little bit of the bookend method, if we had, let's see, 10 times 10, that's 100. If we had 20 times 20, that's 400. All right, so we know that we are dealing with a number that's going to be in between 15 and 20. Why do I know that? Because 10 makes 100, 20 makes 400, and 350 is much closer to 400. Okay, so now you got to start by checking here. 15 and then go 16. Okay, and let's see how close. 15 and 15, I believe that gives us 225. Okay, where 16 and 16 is going to give us 256. We're getting closer, but not close enough. So what I would recommend is let's immediately jump to 19 and see how close that gets us. All right, that is 361. Now, we're getting real close here. So 18 and 18 324. Okay, now comes the time that you have to make sure we understand. Is it okay to give an estimate that does create a number bigger than what they give you? In other words, is it okay to use 361 even though it is bigger? Yes, it is okay, because 361 is going to get us closest to 350. So that means, to switch out another color here, that our estimate is 19. All right, we know that the square root of 350 is not 19, but it is closest to what that would actually be, and we're just giving an estimate. All right, guys, that covers the whole section there. Keep working hard, ask questions if you got them, and you guys are going to be just fine. All right, see you in the next one.